How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Marshall Drop. Today is February 5th, 2021, and today we're obviously going to talk about the potential major Northeast snowstorm that could happen this weekend and into early next week. And we'll also talk about the next potential snowstorm that could bring a decent amount of snow to the Midwest as well as the Northeast headed into next week. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by first taking a look at the potential major Northeast snowstorm that could happen in the Northeast headed into late this week. And we're talking around the Sunday to Monday time frame, right around the 7th of Sunday, 7th to 8th. And you see that if we take a look at the European model, the precipitation forecasting map from the European model, you see a pretty large swath of thunderstorm squall lines just off the coast of the southeast, and just to the northwest of that we see an extending band of snow, and some of the snow you see is heavy at times, especially closer to the rain snow line, where we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more convergent energy right around the rain snow line, which is inducing those heavier squall lines. And you see that these snowfall rates aren't really something you want to underestimate, because they could dump a heavy amount of snow, even though the storm might move relatively fast, especially compared to the last snowstorm we've experienced in the Northeast. But you see a pretty large swath of snow, and this could dump a decent amount of snow throughout a lot of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. And another thing I want to point out is that look, it's completely swallowing up the I-95 corridor. Maybe a little bit of the coastal regions of Delmarva Peninsula and New Jersey are in the rain snow line mix. However, for the most part, the I-95 corridor is entirely in a snow event at this point, right around 60 hours from now. So keep that in mind. Just past the 2-day mark, you guys will experience snow along the Interstate 95 corridor. And then this extends to New England, where the rain snow line will be far to the south of New England to really be much of a threat in terms of how much snowfall you'll receive. So to those who don't like snow, unfortunately, the snowfall won't really be limited by the rain snow line like you may have hoped, because the rain snow line seemingly is going to stay south of New England as a result of a strong ridge that's bringing very cold temperatures to the Northeast, and it's going to continue to bring below average temperatures throughout the month of February throughout the Northeast, like it has been for the past several weeks in the Northeast. So keep that in mind in New England, that this is going to also affect even the coastal regions of New England, such as Long Island, and then Boston will be affected by this, as this is going to affect a lot of people despite not being such a major or strong snowstorm like that. And compared to the GFS model, let's zoom in a little bit, and they're both now saying a very similar track. I know in my previous videos I said it's unlikely that we're going to see any sort of snowstorm, because both the computer models were pretty much persisting on taking this storm well out to sea. However, now they're doing the complete opposite today, which goes to show you how quickly the forecast changes when we're talking about a forecast that's still 5 to 3 days out. However, we're now approaching the time frame where the forecast definitely becomes more certain, because we're only around 2 to 3 days out from this event happening. And you see that the GFS model is taking a very similar track to what the European model is saying. I think at the 66-hour mark, they're actually in the same millibar pressure, and yeah, they are. The European model 66 hours from now is at 996 millibars, and so is the GFS. While the GFS model is a little bit more offshore, which would mean lighter snow event for you guys. It means a lighter snowfall accumulation threat for you guys. It's still bringing a pretty large area of snow throughout the Northeast, and it's affecting some of the biggest populations in the Northeast, such as Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, and more cities across the Interstate I-95 corridor. So this is going to be impactful. This is going to affect a large amount of people. Even though it won't be necessarily a major snowstorm, it still definitely could cause some trouble if you're on the roads, and you might at least need to acknowledge this storm because you might need to bring out the shovels again after receiving over a foot of snow in many areas in the Northeast from this past snowstorm. So you guys definitely need to, in the Northeast, definitely need to pay a close eye on this one. And I would say prepare now, because I think now, since we're only about 3 to 2 days out, we're pretty certain that the snowfall is going to occur somewhere in the Northeast, especially if you're closer along the coast, and it could be heavy at times, and it's better to be safe than sorry. So I'd say just prepare for this snowstorm, maybe get some extra food, because it might be difficult to go out on Monday or Sunday when this snowstorm occurs. So keep that in mind, and you might want to make second thoughts of making certain plans around Sunday and Monday time frame, because the snowfall rates could be potentially high at times, especially if this storm strengthens a little bit earlier than the computer models expect. However, you might be asking, what will change? What could potentially rise the snowfall forecast for a lot of the Northeast? Well, it really all depends on how much unstable air there is and the position of these ridges, and that's just to the north of it, and a ridge that's just to the east of it. Because if the computer models identify that there's a little bit more cold air that's going to be behind the storm, and the current storm right now is going to bring a little bit more stronger northwesterly winds to bring that cold air down than they initially expect, then there could be a possibility that the jet stream dip will be more pronounced. It'll dip further southward, and it'll create more unstable air in this region to not only form this storm earlier, but rapidly intensify the storm earlier to make it more of a major snowfall threat. And we're still 3 days out from it. While it is becoming certain that you're going to see snow along the coast, I'd say there's still that possibility that this could strengthen more than the computer models expect at this point. And it's definitely something you guys need to watch, because if there's a little bit more unstable air, the jet stream dip will be more pronounced, and not only the storm will form earlier, it'll grow stronger, and it'll move closer to the coast if the jet stream dip were more pronounced, because it'll change the orientation of the jet stream from going mainly in a diagonal to straight up easterly direction to more of a southerly direction that's a little bit more vertical, that would steer the storm closer along the coast, and as a result bring heavier precipitation along the coast. So it's definitely something we need to keep in mind over the next several days, how much unstable air there is. If there's less unstable air, there's less of a chance there's going to be a jet stream dip, which means there's less likely of a chance it's going to get its convection going earlier, which means a weaker storm along the Northeast. And not only that, the weaker jet stream dip would mean there's going to be a weaker presence of a vertical jet stream area, which would mean that this storm would move more out to sea rather than along the coast. So it's all pretty much, so yeah, it's a long line of, it's pretty much a very long butterfly effect when it comes to weather, because one factor pretty much spreads all throughout the world pretty much. But to simplify it, I'm only mentioning these two ridges because that's really all you need to know in what's going to determine the jet stream dip and how much unstable air there's going to be right around the East Coast. So we need to keep that in mind. However, I'll say with confidence, you guys will experience at least some sort of snowstorm event along the East Coast, and it could be minor. And that's, for the most part, what the computer models are forecast. Well, I wouldn't say minor, but I think the computer models are mainly leaning towards just bringing a moderate snowfall accumulation threat along the East Coast, where the snowfall accumulation isn't expected to be entirely high from this first snowstorm, yet it's not going to be entirely low either, like only 1 inch of snow. As if we take a look at the GFS model, it's a little bit on the lower end, I would say, for a lot of the Interstate 95 corridor just north of Washington, D.C. it's mostly an area of 1 to 3 inches, and maybe some isolated areas of 3 to 6, maybe further southward, like in North Carolina and Virginia, where it's more likely you guys will experience a heavier bands of snow because the GFS is taking the low pressure to be closest to the United States, right around North Carolina and South Carolina, and then by the time it moves further northward, it's going to be a little bit more offshore, so the heavy bands will miss out on the Northeast snowstorm. However, for the most part, it's mainly a moderate to light snowstorm for the Northeast. However, compare that to the European, where the European is definitely leaning more towards a moderate type of snowstorm and borderline major in some areas. I'll go as far as saying that. Let's take a look at the the European snowfall accumulation forecast, assuming that 1 inch of rain equates to 10 inches of snow. So let's take a look at that right now. And you're going to see that the European is leaning a little bit more towards bringing a higher end moderate snowstorm to a borderline major snowstorm for some areas in the Northeast. As if we take a look at its forecast, you see there's a large area of 3 to 6 inches, and I noticed that a lot of this is almost exactly southeast of the entire I-95 corridor, which is very atypical because typically speaking, when we see a low pressure move up the Northeast, it's usually the other way around, where the heaviest snow is in the northwest of the Interstate 95 corridor, and then we have the rain and the mixing just to the southeast of the I-95 corridor, which limits the snowfall. However, it seems like in this case, it's going to be the complete opposite, which is interesting, where the heaviest snowfall is expected to be just southeast of the Interstate 95 corridor. And the reason why, obviously, is because this low pressure is going to be well far offshore for the most part, and the areas closest to a low pressure system will obviously experience the most convection, the most precipitation out of this low pressure system. So it's expected why there's going to be the snowfall potential is going to be maximized along the coast. However, if we were to take a look at the snowfall forecasts for a lot of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, you see a pretty big area of 3 to 6 inches extending to North Carolina and even as far south as Georgia and South Carolina, and this extends to Virginia and a lot of New Jersey and the southeastern portions of New England as well. And we do see some areas of up to 8 inches of snow or over 6 inches of snow, and it's pretty much right along, I would say, the Richmond area, where it's going to be the sweet spot in terms of the heaviest snow from this storm. And it's borderline, or maybe you could consider it a major snowstorm if over 6 inches of snow is forecasted right around Virginia. So keep that a close eye on this one in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And I definitely wouldn't be surprised if the snowfall forecast rises up if the computer models forecast a little bit more unstable air behind this storm to really strengthen it even more than what it's expected to do as it heads up the East Coast. And in terms of the chances of this completely moving offshore, I find it unlikely at this point. I think some places in the Northeast will experience snow, especially if you're southeast of the Interstate 95 corridor. I think it's almost inevitable you're going to see some snow from this. But there could definitely be changes. Maybe those further inland behind the I-95 corridor will experience little to no snow, but I think for the most part, it's most likely you're going to experience snow from this all throughout the Northeast. And I'd say a moderate snowfall threat is most likely at this point, as a major snowfall threat is currently less likely, but I wouldn't rule it out. I just want to say that. But now let's take a look at this next potential snowstorm that could impact a lot of Midwest and the Northeast headed into next week. And let me move forward into the 120-hour forecast based off the European model, because it really gives a good idea of how major this snowstorm could be. And if we take a look, you see that there's a long extending area throughout the Midwest of 3 to 6 inches of snow extending to Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and a lot of Michigan as well. And then it increases even more once we head to the Northeast, where a very large area of 6 to 12 inches is expected throughout upstate New York and northern Pennsylvania, and even portions of New England and New Jersey could get involved in the 6 to 12 inches of snow based off the European model. So there's still a lot of uncertainty, obviously, because we're forecasting this beyond 4 days out. And like we saw with this most recent forecast from the GFS and the European model just a day ago, and comparing it to today, where the low pressure completely changed its forecast from being no snow to the Northeast, now bringing a decent amount of snow along the Northeast. So there's still a lot of time remaining to narrow the impacts down and to narrow the trajectory of this storm, to narrow the snowfall accumulation forecasts, and to narrow down how strong the storm will actually be. So let's take a look at what the European model is forecasting when it comes to the radar, because it gives a good idea of what's going to happen and what's really going to cause the European to really bring heavy snowfall accumulation throughout the Northeast. And you see that there's a pretty large area of snow just to the north of the low pressure system. While this low pressure system isn't necessarily very strong, it's at 1,003 millibars, which isn't entirely strong for a mid-latitude cyclone. It's still strong enough to at least dump a heavy amount of snowfall throughout New England and upstate New York and throughout the interior Northeast pretty much. And it's bringing heavy rain just to the south of it. And just because the storm is 1,003 millibars does not mean it could pack a punch when it comes to precipitation. If we move further back, I'm not going in chronological order, but whatever. So let's take a look further back, and you see that the snowstorm will originate right around, I would say, Arkansas. The low pressure will originate at 1,010 millibars. There's going to be a decent amount of unstable air behind it. That's really going to induce a lot of unstable air to create this snowstorm throughout the Midwest. And there's going to be an ongoing pattern for the Northeast where they're just going to be trapped in a strong jet stream dip. And that will lead to a potential of potentially a lot more snowstorms ahead for a lot of Northeast. And it is pretty much the worst timing you would want a lot of these snowstorms if you don't like snow in the Northeast, because February has always been known as the most active month when it comes to snowstorms. While it isn't the coldest month, it's definitely the most active when it comes to snowfall, because during the month of February, the snowpack in Canada is at its peak, which helps store a lot of that cold air in Canada. And as that cold air moves further south, it interacts with that warm air a lot, and that creates a lot of unstable air to create a lot of these snowstorms. And since we're seeing a strong jet stream dip throughout the United States, it's just going to cause a pattern where there's going to be a lot of snowstorms in the eastern half of the United States, I suspect, and we could see more major snowstorms like the one we just saw and the one that's forecasted in the Northeast throughout February. So keep that in mind. The GFS model isn't as lenient as bringing as major of a snowstorm as the European model. However, it's still bringing a very similar track and strength of this storm head into next week, where we see that snow begin to form, and then there's a decent swath of snow extending throughout the Ohio River Valley, and then eventually. However, what I noticed is that the GFS model eventually weakens. Well, this is the initial snowstorm I'm talking about, but what I noticed is that the GFS model initially begins to weaken these storms as they head to the Northeast, because it's going to lose unstable air. But the European model is still lenient on bringing even more snow throughout New England, and an even stronger storm, as it does expect a little bit more unstable air to help these storms out and help them maintain their strength to dump a lot more snow to New England. So, and I'd say I'd give a little bit more confidence to the European model because it's a little better with the winter storms, but we need to take both computer models pretty evenly, I'd say, because they're both very reliable. But I'd give the slight edge to European, which is bringing a little bit more snow. In terms of the total snowfall forecast over the next 5 days, you see 6 to 12 inches throughout upstate New York, Pennsylvania, and a little bit of Ohio, and even as far south as Virginia and North Carolina. And keep in mind, it is including both of the snowstorms I'm listing in this map, where I listed Storm 1 right here, the one that's expected to move up the East Coast, and Storm 2 that's expected to move through the United States, through the Midwest and into the Northeast. And it's going to bring heavy snowfall combined throughout the Northeast, and it's going to add on to what you've already experienced from the last major snowstorm, where up to over 2 feet of snow was experienced in many areas. So it's just going to add insult to injury. And throughout the Midwest, 3 to 6 inches of snow. So keep that in mind headed into next week. There's going to be another potential major snowstorm that could form, at least one of them could form into a major snowstorm. And I want you guys to definitely keep that in mind, because it's going to be important to determine how much snowfall you guys will receive in a given area. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more of our related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather related content. And I hope you guys have a good day.